It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Okay, hi, Esperanza.
Hi, Irwin. I am looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Back to the bridge.
Back to the bridge. And you know, incidentally, it's one of my pet peeves to hear people who say, "Oh, where are you going? Are you going to bridge?" But this is the bridge.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I understand. I have a list of pet peeves, by the way, but one day we'll do a podcast on that. But I understand. But this was called the bridge, so we can continue to call it that. So we left off in 1957 with the first, really their inaugural race, which was just a, it was before they got into all of the bigger things that they did. It was the East Hampton Star reporting the crazy attendance of 30,000 cars parked a mile away. But anyway, so 1958, this is when we're really getting like the headline events, the Bridgehampton sports car races, because they were part of national championships. The Vanderbilt Cup got resurrected, really big time events. But also in 1958, Nascar came to Bridgehampton.
I mean, isn't this, it's like, whoever knows about this story, obviously, this history, obviously it's like, yeah, whatever. But to me, it's just incredible that this happened. I have to stop using that word, but it is. I can hardly believe that this kind of event was taking place here, even though, it just goes to show, or shows to go you, as my father used to say,
okay.
that this is a very special place because there's this confluence of people and things, and I don't know what, that creates just unique situations, unique events.
I would agree. I mean, because remember now, even look, in the 1950s, you had a very big summer colony, very wealthy summer colony was here. You had the farmers in Bridgehampton, Wainscott, Sagaponack. You had the farm families, you had the fishermen, the baymen.
Yeah, I mean, this was the height of potato farming, right, in particular, right? I mean, this was the biggest source of potatoes, even for the like nationally, it was a big source.
No question about it. We were Idaho before Idaho came into play.
Yes, exactly.
We were really. I mean, Suffolk County is still a very large. I keep reading somewhere that it's still the largest agricultural county in the state, which
yes,
I find incredibly hard to believe, but I've read it a few times. But 1950s Suffolk County was an enormous. I mean, they were farm. You go up island, Smithtown was farmland. Places that are really much more suburban now. And to your point, remember, this is the 1950s. You had the abstract expressionists were part of this. A part of the greater East End. You had
that makes sorry, I have to interrupt you on this because you make such an interesting point. Obviously, I think at this point Jackson Pollock was gone, but
correct.
But there were still so many of these artists out here that you have to wonder, did de Kooning go to these races?
Great question.
It's like you start wondering the coming together of different people.
Yeah, I couldn't find that. It's a great question, great thought. I couldn't find any, specifics as who, although to that segue, there was one part where I read how it did attract a lot of celebrities, very, now this isn't me talking because I'm far more politically correct, but very glamorous and beautiful women were attending these events. I mean, this was all part of this, this research I had here to give it to you, in the quote, "The pits of Bridgehampton were equally fascinating. Cutting edge race cars from around the world, film stars, some of the most beautiful women in the world, and awestruck kids mingled in happy celebration of speed." So congratulations on that segue that you didn't even realize was a segue.
Again.
But to that point, yes. So there was a lot of hubbub going on, and we'll just save that thought because they touch on this towards the end. I'll give you a little teaser now, where in sort of their final days, they were saying the bridge was part of the reason this place morphed into the Hamptons.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah.
It was one of those building blocks. No question.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I think so too. So, wow, that was, we didn't intend to go there, but we had to go there.
I mean, it's
really
kind
did.
of crazy because when you think about it, remember Carl Fisher and Montauk, and
Right.
hello, Carl Fisher and Indianapolis.
Yes,
I mean,
there's a connection,
right?
Yeah, I never thought of that connection, but that's true. Carl Fisher, we did when we spoke of Leisure Hour at a prior podcast, Carl Fisher, absolutely wanted to make it to Miami Beach, and actually was the developer of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah.
So it all comes into play. So NASCAR came in 58. Now, obviously NASCAR is enormous now. I mean, it's a massive spectator sport. Probably wasn't so back in 1958 as it is today. But interestingly, and again, this is not a auto racing podcast, but there was an interesting part. NASCAR stock cars, if you will, tend to race on an oval track. And this was far from an oval. This was
sinuous. Yeah, this was definitely not a straight line or just a straight single curve, many curves.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, between NASCAR, you had these Can-Am races going on. Can-Am was notorious for having no rules. It was all about experimentation, and it made for spectacular race watching in the hills of Bridgehampton. These cars were going, 110 miles an hour. Now, Esperanza and I both have the same book, Bridgehampton. It's called Bridgehampton Racing: From the Streets to the Bridge. It's by an author named
Joel Finn.
Yes, Joel Finn. And there are some great pictures in this book where you actually see the spectators watching these races and everything else. And so it was just really fascinating. Now, from the files of, however, all good things do come to an end. There were financial challenges with this. Spectators, drivers, it was great for them, but bank loans and promissory notes were coming due and had to be used to complete the circuit. The track gates often were overwhelmed, and a lot of times spectators just didn't pay. They marched into the track. The track was in the middle of the woods, Esperanza.
Right. So they would just sneak in through the woods rather than a main entrance. Yeah.
It was sort of like the present day deer. They just found their way onto your backyard, I guess. But
that's exactly right. I mean, this was pre 8-foot fencing everywhere.
Right. So people would just find their way. This place was, remember, it was still not very populated. This was an enormous track covering 600 acres, and I'm sure there were compromises in the fences here or there, and people got in, but it was just, again, we touched on the celebrities that were there. Again, not to get too deep in the weeds, Dan Gurney, this was a major driver in his day. He came and won the inaugural Bridgehampton Can-Am, and other. Again, I wasn't a racing fan, but at this time I'm a teenage boy, so I knew.
Yeah.
I guess I sort of knew these. I mean, I know these names: Mark Donohue, Al Unser Sr., Sterling Moss, Mario Andretti. These were car racers that raced here.
They were household names
names in the racing as auto drivers, and even for non-fans like myself, I guess I just knew them. But the last, really not the end of the road, but the last major professional race in Bridgehampton was a Trans Am that was in June of 1970. Mark Donohue, this is a guy, was also a Hall of Fame auto racer, Indy 500 winner. He won that race. Now, that was the last of the big races, but Esperanza, listen to this part of research. And by the way, we're getting a lot of this from the bridgehamptonraceway.net. This is really, the people that this place meant so much to, and they built a beautiful website about this. And we're calling a lot of this information from here, amongst other places. But listen to this quote, because this is something we touched on privately before we were going to talk about this. So I want to get Esperanza's take on this. Now, worldwide publicity from the Bridgehampton races had greatly enhanced the popularity of the South Fork and the Hamptons as a vacation destination. I guess that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Fair characterization. Yeah.
Now, according to this, in an effort to share in this newfound windfall, a town-wide zoning revision broad-brushed much of the agricultural and undeveloped land for residential development, including the 10 square miles of the forested ridge where the racetrack was along the Peconic Bay. And now here's where we're getting into, and again, this is from their website, so, this, take it for what it is, but this was their feelings on it. The town planners essentially were overlooking the residential use of this racetrack and the 600 acres. And they demoted at the point, now this is interesting, Esperanza, against all established zoning principles, they demoted the racetrack to a non-conforming use,
right,
which seriously hindered improvements to the property for recreation. And according to this, it also raised the tax burden for farmers and owners of undeveloped land, which resulted in a gold rush for land speculators and house builders. So in one fell swoop, according to this, the politicians changed the engine of Southampton's economy from farming and tourism to land speculation. It's a big statement.
What a turn of the tide. And that was 1970s.
Correct. Right around 1970. And again, now we're getting into more issues that are really a lot more present day, because now that the new homes were getting closer to the track, inevitably people complained about the noise from the track.
Right. Right.
Remember, we're in a place we get people complaining about the landscapers using the blowers.
Yeah.
So,
or for that matter, the airport at this point, it seems like a comparable point.
Exactly. So there was all of this going on, and the town government at the time included the track into this anti-noise law that was really aimed at discotheques and the like. And now things really were changing. And
yeah, so here they were already struggling really to make ends meet. It's what an enterprise that must be to have this racetrack. And then you have all of these additional obstacles thrust in your face.
And it sort of became the perfect storm, Esperanza, because in addition to all of this, because of the noise restrictions, then you had to get amateur car racing, which was, believe it or not, apparently a little quieter. So the usage actually increased because they had to start paying the bills. Yeah. So you had amateur races, quieter, but more frequent. Now we're also in the 1970s, and some of the initial investors were getting older, and they wanted to start, well, maybe we should cash in our chips and cash in on this land rush and everything else. So now you had some problems happening.
Sort of the beginning of the end.
It was sort of like the beginning of the end, in 1981. Now, I mean, again, think about this, 40 years later, there was still races going on as late as 81, but there was a bridge there, the Lowenbrow Bridge in the ditch on the track collapsed. And there was a $3 million purchase offer put on the table from a condominium developer. $3 million. That's a bargain when you think about it, now. But here's a really cool part. And we were touching on this, you and I, earlier, how actually environmentalists came in, including the group for the South Fork, defending the racetrack.
I know. Well, was that because the racetrack seemed a more viable preservation initiative than the alternative, which was multiple residences and or ultimately what? I mean, was it
a golf course?
The golf course.
Because a golf course was
proposed already in there. Yeah.
Right. It was thrown in because the racers were saved initially by a group, the Friends of Bridgehampton and the Watchdog Group, which was probably in their early days in 1981. They're very much more prominent today. They're now called the Group for the East End, but at that time they were the Group for the South Fork, which was a group that was fighting to preserve open space in the face of overdevelopment. And there was press coverage. Paul Newman, who was always a big car racing buff, actor Paul Newman, got involved in this fray. And interestingly, a local developer, Carol Connor, this is a very large developer out here, Bridgehampton Commons, amongst other things, but she was in the mix as a condominium developer. But so you had all of these things going on. And now, here's where we had Robert Rubin coming into the picture. And they called him an angel at the time, from the Ferrari Drivers Club. This guy, I don't know. I know his name from just being around here. He was basically a Wall Street trader and a car collector, but I think had a reputation as a pretty straightforward guy. And he got very involved in the process and started acquiring shares of the track and eventually acquired it and became the owner of the property.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure that transaction didn't take place at the Candy Kitchen.
Good question, but probably not. But then again, who knows? And he tried for years to gain exemptions with the town from all of these noise restrictions, but the Southampton Town Board apparently kept turning him away and found it more expedient to really continue to support the housing developers around the track. And these speculators were ensuring their clients that racing at the bridge was over. So you sort of saw the handwriting really starting to happen here, unfortunately. And, at the time, Rubin said if the government didn't want the track, he could build a golf course and 40 houses. And the town council actually opted for the golf because of all of the noise complaints from the residents, and it brought joy to the developers.
And the group for the South Fork, I'm sure, was against the golf course, right? Yeah, like you were saying,
completely against it. And Newsday,
because the environmental impact,
right,
incredibly, is much greater. It's amazing to think that a place that in its heyday drew 40,000 spectators. And 180 drivers a year or whatever it was, something like that, how that could be less environmentally intrusive than a golf course, right?
It's completely true. And to your point about the group for the South Fork, they were talking about this. They were talking about the history of the polluted wells surrounding the nearby Noyak Golf Club, which was right nearby. And the group, you mentioned the group for the South Fork. They were talking how golf course chemicals threaten the drinking water.
Yes.
And
which is such an issue today. Still, it remains an issue. How is that possible, right?
Look, golf courses are pristine, beautiful, but again, grass, lawn, not that politically correct anymore, and falling more and more out of favor because of the requirements of irrigation, fertilizers, again, with conversation for a different platform. But the group for the South Fork had bumper stickers at the time, Esperanza: noise pollution is transient, water pollution is forever.
But that's so true.
Right. Yeah, it is true. And
and think about it nowadays with electric cars.
Right.
They could be racing,
correct.
Clean cars.
And if you want to talk about a true odd couple, you had environmentalists and auto racers join together for a common cause against the golf course. It was, and again, to your point, you think of a golf course as this beautiful, serene environment, and
right. At least it's green kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and a racing track. Oh my God, with the noise, but meanwhile, it was like as you just mentioned, to your point, less of an impact. So, I mean, you had the group for the South Fork Newsday, which was the voice of Long Island. I mean, maybe still, I don't know if it's got the same as a voice as loud, but certainly in 1980s Long Island for sure. And to talk about what's called sort of like the last lap, and that's a term they use, the Bridgehampton Raceway website used. Now, sort of also ties into a lot of the Our Hamptons mission, because Esperanza, I know you read this, but I'm going to tell it to you because it blew me out the door, much the same way it's probably going to do the same for you. Nor did it help that the New York State Office of Historic Preservation notified Southampton Town. Bridgehampton, the bridge is located in the town of Southampton, notified Southampton Town that the bridge race circuit had been deemed worthy of inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places and was now listed on the state register.
And here we have the precedent, and repeatedly seems to happen out here and everywhere. I shouldn't just point the finger at our local governments, but it seems that does not matter.
No, and because at the end of the day, it's local government that's solely responsible for the protection of historic sites. And as they said on their website, and I quote, "We've all seen how well that works," because this was deemed worthy to be saved as a site,
it's iconic,
completely iconic. Again, and Esperanza, you and I have talked about this so often on Our Hamptons at this point. Just the baymen, the fishermen, the farmers, the abstract expressionists, and yes, the summer colony and the auto racers. They belong in the same sentence, I think, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's all part of they're all threads in the fabric of the history of this area.
Right. Completely. And
so ultimately the golf course won, and Bob Rubin, that's what he did.
Now I've never been on this course, but yes,
I have. Yeah.
You have. Okay. So this course is called the Bridge. At least
the Bridge.
It's at least it's sort of an homage, I guess, Esperanza.
Well, he totally, I have to say that is, it is a golf course, no question. And you pay in, hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a member there.
That's exactly right.
But it is like a racing and the bridge history. It's like a museum for that, for sure.
Yes. Now, I've never been on the site. You have. You can speak to it personally. So Bob Rubin did, he did make part of the interior decor literally like a museum of the motorsports at the bridge.
Yeah, there's an art collection there.
Yeah. So we're grateful for that. So, and again, and even
what by art collection, I mean that every single piece in the art, all the artworks allude to racing and cars, and so they have a connection to whether it's specifically the history of the Bridge Raceway or just automobile racing in general. It's really fascinating, actually.
And they termed it here, the bridge survives as a ghost track, and I guess that's a good that's a good way. That's really
they preserved sections of the track, one of the bridges. I think it was the starting line that was preserved. And by the way, even I am in that collection.
So wait a minute. Hold on. So now, Wait a minute, I may have to take a ride over there now. So in other words, if I go into this museum that's on the bridge, you were actually,
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's on display all the time, but there is a video piece. The artist's name is Shimon Ati, I think it is, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And so my mother and I showed up there. This was like an open call made through a friend, Jess Frost, who worked with Bob Rubin at the time, working with the artwork. And her father, Guy Frost, was also heavily involved in the history of the racetrack.
Yes.
And I know you read some.
Yes, and we were about to credit that. And I mean, we're part of what we're reading here at the end is really, I think, Guy Frost's words.
Oh, okay.
He was president emeritus of the Racing Heritage Group. So
so Jess just reached out and said, we need some people to just come and be a part of this video piece. And then that's what we did. And it was hilarious. We had to don these like funky, period vintage sort of shirts and, looked like spectators. And it was a lot of fun, but I'm sort of memorialized there.
Wow. So we have a
total personal collection.
That's all right. That's a really good inside tidbit. It could really motivate me, seeing Esperanza and Esperanza's absolutely adorable mother Blanca, to see both of you in the permanent collection at this place. That's okay. That's I have to put that on the bucket list now. Okay.
There you go.
That's a good one. But so I guess it's really the end. The bridge survives. It's there as a golf course, and as a ghost track. Again, there is, and it says here, Bob Rubin did preserve over a mile of the racetrack, as well as artifacts, guardrails, flag stations. So there are those things.
I think he even does. I have a recollection that if it's not yearly, I think it is. They have like a car show there, right? Even like so, there's still definitely that connection. So
I mean, maybe the last year or two with the pandemic, it didn't happen, but perhaps this year we should got to keep our eyes open for that, because it really is. It's a really terrific story, and again, the bridge should not be minimized. It is just to the point we made earlier. It is really an essential part of the history and the sense of place
and the economy at one point, really, right?
The economy at one point, of what this place was. And again, I always tend to wonder about this, perhaps with a different cast of characters in elected positions. Who knows we might still have something. This place might have still been here. I don't know. It's one of those. It's a rhetorical question. We'll never know the answer.
Hindsight 2020 kind of thing, right?
Hindsight 2020, but
we can bemoan the decisions of our politicians of the past and the ones current, but
I guess, and there's
only so much you can do.
And I guess that's as American as apple pie. So I would say that's probably true. But really, it's really a fascinating story, and I had a lot of fun bringing it, talking about it, and researching it. So it was.
Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
No, I also think it's a little bit, again, a tad off the radar. Like, I mean, I don't know if, even while researching this, even I didn't know the sheer magnitude of what it meant until really, I always knew of the club,
right,
but
not how significant it was. Yeah,
exactly.
And one thing that I wanted to say, and we're going to, I guess, end on whatever point you would like to make, right. But I wanted to say that in all of these talks that we have, I always, and maybe I've said this before, I'll keep saying it like a broken record. What I really think is our not our mission, but one of the things that we'd like to leave people with is this introduction to a place, a subject, a piece of history that piques your interest and makes you go and delve into it maybe further, or, it's like, if you feel anything like us, you want to know more. So I hope that we accomplish that with this.
And I can't think of a better place to end than on that note, except to say I second it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Irwin,
That was
so
fun.
much fun. And gosh, I always feel like there's so much more we could say, but till next time. And
sounds good. It was that was fun, and we'll definitely find something else to talk about. I'm pretty confident.
No doubt. Always a
Okay.
pleasure.
Thanks, Esperanza.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.